and welcome to this live stream on how to network. I'm David Bell, founder of PCD Club. Delighted to be joined by Nicola Solomou from Silverpen Careers. Welcome, Nicola.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
So lovely to see you today. We're going to discuss over the next 60 minutes some key, I suppose, hacks, ideas, inspiration for young professionals on networking. It's a subject that is close to both of our hearts. We've both essentially built businesses off the back of getting to know people, understanding how networking works, and really looking forward to speaking to you today. Are you excited about being on this webinar and sharing some knowledge across the course of the next hour?
Definitely, and I think it's great also to be chatting with you because you are an expert in the field. Like you said, your business model is built around networking, and it'll be good to discuss and see what ideas we have as well.
Brilliant. And we want lots of questions, don't we, across the course of this hour. Test us with your queries and questions. A lot of people really don't like networking, do they, Nicola? And I mean, why do you think, what do you think holds people back in terms of networking? You know, why is it that it comes up high on the list of things that people don't like?
Yeah, I think it's strange because networking is part of being social humans. We're constantly networking, we're constantly speaking to people. I like to think that every encounter is also an opportunity to network as well. So I think it's just about teaching people what kind of skills are required, how to develop those skills. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today as well.
Fantastic. So let's build up the conversation from the start. Silverpen Careers, please do tell us a little bit more about the company you founded and your background as a lawyer.
Sure. So I recently started Silverpen Careers in the last kind of 2 years, and that has been primarily, as you said, based on this premise of my network, which I've been able to kind of cultivate over time. So I previously worked as a tax and private wealth lawyer at an international law firm in London, and I also spent some time in the Middle East. So through those experiences, started to build connections. Prior to that, I also went to King's College in London, and then I did an exchange in Sweden and a master's in the Netherlands. So I've kind of, been around different countries and been building, training my connections through that. And in terms of how that ties into Silverpen, so one of the main services is we match individuals with a professional in the industry they want to enter into. So if someone wants to be a lawyer or wants to get into tech or wants to go into the UN or fashion, we will have someone who we can match them up with. That person will help them tailor their CV, their cover letter, help them with interview prep.
One of the cool things about networking is opportunities de facto arrive through knowing people, don't they? If you didn't know anyone, it would be very hard to see a world where you would create opportunities. I mean, we're going to talk about what makes good networking, but essentially creating your own path is about knowing people, isn't it? And understanding opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And that is key to the business. Like you said, we can talk about it in more detail. Aside from that, Silverpen also provides professional skills development courses or workshops. So they're aimed primarily at colleges or educational institutions, companies, and then individuals as well. So anything like networking or public speaking, negotiation skills. And then the final part of Silverpen is we support individuals with applications to university. So anything from foundation to undergrad, postgrad for universities across the UK, the EU and the US. So that is Silverpen, essentially.
Very interesting. And just sort of casting your mind back as a young lawyer, I mean, what was it you think that young lawyers, say, or those in professional services, find hard about, like areas like networking, like presentation skills? What are the hurdles that you find and you recall from your time in the profession?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of because I can only speak in terms of my experience, there was a lot of people who I felt just didn't have the confidence to introduce themselves, or when they did introduce themselves, it wasn't easy to follow what it was they were doing. I think people you understand the kind of jargon from their industry. So I think it's very important primarily to present yourself in a way that is clear and simple, not technical, and you carry that approach through your entire conversation with someone as well. I think
firms equip the younger professionals with the tools to almost does it get overlooked in a sense of people think, oh, well, you'll figure out your elevator pitch when you're 10 years PQE, until then, sort of don't worry about explaining what we do. Do you think, or what's your observation on how firms equip people for those conversations?
Yeah, I think not. I think firms definitely don't equip people, but if we go back a little bit in terms of school or university, they don't really provide the skills or the workshops to develop those skills, which is what Silverpen aims to do in terms of giving people the skills to develop those. The tools rather to develop those skills, and firms don't do it enough, and I think that's really important for them to include in their training programs when they're producing trainees, because they will then go on to become partners who need to bring in work. And if they've gotten to that stage where they're just very good lawyers in terms of I can apply the law, it's not going to bring in work, it's not going to create business, it's not going to create profit, which is clearly an issue for law firms or any business.
And there's an additional element here where the pandemic has affected the development of those who are training, those who might have completed training just before lockdown, when they would traditionally have started cutting their teeth on the circuit, going out and about, meeting people of their peer group. So do you think that adds an extra hurdle for today's young professionals, that maybe a bit of their development has been missing, or maybe now they're trying to catch up, and that's part of the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, from personal experience as well. So I teach part-time at a university in London, and some of the students that I started teaching last year had gone from school during COVID to first year of university, again in COVID online. So they're suddenly faced with me in year 2, and I'm trying to get them to discuss, because I teach quite discursive, debatable subjects, and they have no or very few presentation skills, communication skills, networking skills even less. So that's going to make it even more difficult when they go into their professional careers. And then also in terms of professionals as well, there are trainees that started their training contracts, like you said, online. So they didn't have a training contract is so difficult and challenging in and of itself in person, So if you don't have that support, if you're not able to meet people and feel comfortable, have people have your back as you progress through your career, it's going to be really difficult to succeed, essentially. So yeah, COVID definitely, I think, a big problem.
Okay, so just building this up now, then let's define. I mean, what is networking? How do you define it, and how should people think about networking?
Yeah, so I think, according to the Harvard Business Review, so if we look at real, studies or papers, they define it as developing, maintaining relationships with people who have the potential to assist you in your career. And I think that nicely summarizes it, because like we said, we're humans, we're social. Your career, your a lot of your time is revolving around people, talking to people and maintaining those connections, because it's a very well said maxim, but it's not what you know, but who you know. And I think that is so true. Yeah.
I always say to people that they should, in networking, use what's around them. Like, people don't need to perceive themselves as, oh, well, only really well-connected people who are already got fantastic school and university networks can network. Everyone has an opportunity, don't they? If they define who they want to meet, or who they already know in their wider circle, their social circle, and create a strategy from there, isn't it? It's something everyone can adopt and try and put into place, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of my background, I grew up in Cyprus. I went to an English school, which I was lucky enough to do, but I didn't have connections in the UK. So for me, it was coming and starting from scratch and just going to university and building my network there, and then continue. Like you said, it doesn't matter, what kind of school you went to, or what kind of, who your parents know, you can build connections.
There's a question here from Christina. Thank you, Christina, for the question. Any tips on initiating relationships with professionals who are significantly more senior than you? So within an organization, you might be looking at colleagues to network with as well as outside, and creating common ground with more senior colleagues or professionals or external professionals. What would you think on that?
I would say try to find I think you can find a connection and a commonality with anyone. or with most people at least. So I think it's about trying to find a connection or something in common with that person. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It could be something about sports or food or books, traveling. So like in terms of one experience I had, I met someone quite senior at a networking event who was from South Africa. And we just ended up talking about South Africa for a while because I had gone back in 2015 and I loved the place and it was great. And then, just building that connection based on a common interest is going to make you memorable as well, and is going to make that person interested in you because you are interesting or you have interests. So yeah, I think that would probably be my advice.
It's probably not about age, just age, is it? It's about openness. Like if there was someone older but who was open and interested in something that you are, then you can find someone who is de facto closed. You have to say that part of networking is moving on from people who aren't interested in engaging, isn't it? Is the fact. That's why you got to be a little bit, I suppose, thick-skinned, resilient, in a sense of networking relationships. It takes work to get some to work, but some will fall away or won't. People aren't always open at that same point, is it? It's part of the process of building out your network, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think you can control what you can do. You can't obviously control what others can do. So if you are open, if you are, listening and interested, and you're interesting as well, which is something that you can build on by, reading the news or reading about the industry and just pursuing your hobbies and just becoming an interesting person that is, people are gonna want to talk to or are gonna want to engage in. I think that's the most you can kind of do, essentially.
Exactly. You've got to keep the faith, haven't you? And there are people out there who want to connect. I mean, but and what would you say concretely is the benefit of engaging in networking? Young professionals, say working in law firms or tax firms or banks, they're busy. Their time is precious. Are you going to spend many evenings a week going out? What's the goal and what's the dividend that you see from engaging in something that might be just obviously initially definitely on top of what your typical workload is? Who have you seen kind of winning, if you like, out of spending time and pursuing these strategies to get to know people?
I think definitely worth it, definitely valuable. I mean, I'm not saying that you could go to an event and it's going to turn into a lead or you're going to get referred to straight away. It's something that you need to be patient with, and it could take, it could take a couple of days, or it could take a year or a couple of years for it to develop into something. But definitely worth going to networking events. So when I was still working as a lawyer, I remember there were some days, not many, but there were some days where I would go to a morning networking event. I would do a whole day at the office because this was pre-COVID. And then we would go to evening networking events as well, which is a bit of an...
It's not a thing I would do, yeah.
Yeah. But I think but the thing is, you have to be present. Don't be you might be stressed, you might be tired, but just try and bring your authentic, natural self to it. And then in terms of, like you said, time is valuable as well. Think carefully about who you're going to invest time getting in contact with and following up with, because you have to be strategic. You only have a certain number of hours in a day, and you need to maintain like healthy work-life balance. So yeah.
Did you find, though, that you started to enjoy the sort of social scene that develops out of networking? You'll have your opposite numbers in different firms, and they're often on a similar journey. I mean, I found that certainly was that it blurs between friends and work, and that's when you feel actually in the flow with networking, when you're essentially socializing between people who can be, helpful for your career, isn't it? That's the sweet spot.
Exactly. And I think a lot of your events as well that I attended when I was a lawyer, some of those people I've still kept in contact with them, and I'm still quite good friends with them. And I'll see them when they come to London, or, if they're around. So yeah, you're right. It does blur the line between friend and work, and it's a nice place to be as well, because you feel comfortable, and you start seeing your confidence develop in that professional area, which could be quite new to a lot of people, particularly when they start off their careers.
Because also, when we're saying networking, a lot of people think about that awful scenario with the room with the poser tables and uninviting people already in little huddles, and it's hard to break in and break the ice. But really, networking is more of a mindset, isn't it? It's about saying my everyday, there's some environments I go to the reception, but also there's networking available to me in the office with my colleagues, with my social circle. Networking is not defined by being that type of thing that people associate with, an awful experience,
And I think just to pick up on what you said as well, you've got different circles of networking. So in your initial circle is going to be people that so your friends, your family, people you do hobbies with, people that you work with. And then the second kind of circle is more like friends of friends or people that you meet at networking events. So it's about feeling comfortable within these circles. And I mean, in terms of my experience as well, like when I started Silverpen, I started by approaching my first circle and kind of organizing calls, messaging them, letting them know what it is that Silverpen provides. And through that started building traction. And then I moved on to the second stage, which was, okay, can you put me in touch with XYZ? Can you, is there anyone that that would want to mentor for Silverpen? So through that second stage as well, that's kind of how I've developed Silverpen. And one example I can think of, a friend of mine put me in touch with an Asian institutional client, so an education consultancy. And that friend of mine was in a completely different industry. So, you just don't know where that connection is going to lead to and how that connection is going to help you as well.
I mean, I've certainly found that I trained as an accountant 2005, 2008. I met people in that time that are still in the private wealth sector, sometimes even in the same firm. And so, you can create these long-term relationships with people. But at the start of the journey, you don't know what's going to happen, do you? And that, I guess, is the bit that's exciting. But yeah. I think one of the things with networking is about defining what you're trying to do with it. And it might mean, in your context, it might mean trying to meet people outside in order to generate referrals, which is one way of thinking about it, but also internally networking. If you're part of a large organization, networking approach could be about getting that promotion or getting that transfer to another office, or you worked within your law firm at another office out in the Middle East. You can create, if you've got a goal to create something within your organization, you need people on side to do that, don't you? So people can think of their networking goals in so many different ways. It's not narrowly defined.
Yeah, definitely. And because I had the opportunity to go to Bahrain in the first instance. Yeah. And then we had Middle Eastern international conferences there, and you got the opportunity, or I had the opportunity to meet people across the different Middle Eastern offices and the Asian offices as well. And for me at the time, I wanted to do a second kind of stint in the Middle East. So, by talking to people and, getting my face out there and getting people to recognize me, that helped me get my second stint in the Middle East. So it is about short-term goals and, engineering that, but also long-term goals and engineering those as well to make sure that you give yourself the best opportunities, basically.
It's a careful balance as well, isn't it? Because, this is not about being too cynical. At the end of the day, it's about trying to create rapport and get people to like you, so people sometimes could think of networking as being too calculating, very short term, like, oh, I'll do this for you, you do that for me. But really good networking, as far as I can see, is the opposite of that. It's like the long-term view. It's like, I'll help you. Something may come back the other way, but I don't worry about that. As a networker, what I like to do is help other people first. This has been my whole approach, is give to get over the very long term, So what do you think on people, how people should approach it, particularly when you're younger? It can be tempting to think, oh no, I've got to behave in this way in order to get what I want. Whereas it's important to be patient, isn't it, with your networking and approach and relationship building, isn't it? So you don't miscalculate it and get it wrong.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said is key, in that when you approach a person or a situation, be interested in what you can provide. That should be your initial stance. It's not about thinking about yourself. It's going in and thinking, okay, I need to understand what this professional or this person needs in terms of professional or personal. Who can I connect them with? What can I offer them? Is it another advisor? Is it another potential client? Is it a potential job opportunity? Is it someone who can connect them with someone else? So going in with that mindset is really crucial, because like you said, down the line, you don't know what opportunity will be kind of open for you from that.
The lowest hanging fruit there being either like a piece of content or something around what you were talking about is a very safe and easy one, or another professional contact that you know well that is in the same. Either of that to introduce the client is probably the most difficult, but there's plenty of low hanging fruit, isn't there, as a way for people to engage and create value for people, isn't it?
Yeah.
So just thinking about then, we mentioned on the top, the elevator pitch and the description of who you are as an individual and the context in which you sit and work with clients is hard to get right, particularly early doors. If you've got, you're in a department of a big firm, explaining what you do or where you fit in can be hard. But why is it important people give a bit of thought to how they present themselves and their firm, because they'll be frequently called upon to do so, won't they, even from quite early on? So what's your advice around that?
I would say have that elevator pitch ready. You're obviously going to tweak it sometimes depending on who you're speaking to. But, you need to have a kind of short key summary of yourself so that you're not underselling, you're not overselling. It's ready, it's clear. And you need it in every kind of social situation, but particularly like with kind of professional networking events like yours or any other kind of events that you're going to. And yeah, it's important to practice that pitch. It's going to be a bit cringy doing it on your own at home, but it's not worse turning up and kind of stuttering and not being able to present yourself succinctly.
Because so often you'll have a meeting, 20 people around a table. Oh, we'll just go around and introduce us. It's these situations. Don't be caught out by that. Just be ready with your little description, isn't it? Is the thing,
Exactly. And apparently, again, according to research, people form an impression of you in a few seconds. So just that initial pitch is unfortunately or fortunately going to be ingrained in people's minds. So you need to get it right, and not only in terms of verbally, but also your non-verbal communication, which we could probably talk about.
Right. And what about online too? What about on LinkedIn? Your presence at events is obviously critical, but also, you've got visibility online all the way through the year, and many younger professionals that I see don't actually fully leverage, even within the free version of LinkedIn. You want, the clear headshot, the good bio, the keywords that reflect what you do, just so that if anyone looks you up, a client, a colleague, or anyone Googling your name, you want your best foot forward, don't you? So how important do you think getting LinkedIn right is for these young professionals?
Yeah, super, super important. And it's not even just young professionals. I mean, obviously this is young professionals, but a lot of people don't really clearly say what it is they do. They kind of assume knowledge of other people. But what they forget is that not everyone is in the same industry. So it's important to be clear and set out what you do, especially because LinkedIn is very much used. So if you meet someone at a networking event, the first thing you're going to do after you've had a good conversation is get their LinkedIn. And if someone doesn't have a good LinkedIn profile, quote unquote good LinkedIn profile, like you said, a good headshot, clearly set out what their experience is, it's a bit, I don't know, it's your brand, so it's not really going to be very impressive, unfortunately.
And I suppose also, professional firms or regulated firms might be, the younger advisors coming through might be a bit nervous about posting stuff because they're aware that they shouldn't be posting on with certain bit, for example, in financial services around specific investments, and the guidelines on that is quite clear, but it can be off-putting the other way. So it means people draw back entirely. But what would you say individuals should go and speak to their marketing teams and try and find out more of a common sense way of what they could be sharing from quite early on, before they're having really their own hard opinions about things? What are some of the ways that they can stay visible and use a LinkedIn platform, but without, contravening what the firm's trying to do?
Yeah, exactly. So definitely speaking to people in HR within the marketing departments, and then also sharing content that your firm already kind of promotes or puts on LinkedIn. I think, yeah, that's really important. Like posts as well. Yeah. Again, just engage in the platform.
And careers wise, I mean, the LinkedIn platform and profile is so critical, isn't it? Because nowadays, if you move from one firm to another, when you're through your non-compete, you're flicking the switch and your whole network knows that you've moved from one to another, which in the old days would have been lost, isn't it? So that's why, again, it's for people's personal development, careers and goals, being visible on the platform and having a proper profile and a decent number of connections is pretty key, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And make the most of it. It's a free, unless you've got premium, but just make the most of it and get the most that you can out of it, because it is great. And I've got people on LinkedIn. I mean, I must have had a lot of foresight because I don't remember doing this, but I've got people on my LinkedIn from my first year of university or pre-university. So and those connections are now crucial, especially in terms of Silverpen, but just in general, just knowing what people are doing and what opportunities that can create for you.
And the more contacts you have on LinkedIn, the more you get out of it, the more you see news and views from more people, and the more you can actually reach out. So it is give what you get what you give, isn't it? It's if you spend some time on the platform, you'll yield some results from it.
Exactly.
But then just looking on an essential part of networking is also the research piece. So say if you've got an event coming up, you want to know, we always encourage our members to look at the guest list of who's coming, try and make connections on LinkedIn in advance, find out who's going to be there. Don't just think about, if you've got a reception starting at 6, I'll turn up at 7. I've not even looked at who's there and expect to get something from it. How do you think people should be preparing for events, or not just outside the event context, just looking generally to map their network, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, definitely research before you. It's such a networking event is a huge opportunity. So you need to capitalize that opportunity. You need to maximize it. So before you go, research the organization, look at its values, its goals, who it services. Are there articles written about it? Is there, information on it? And then in terms, like you said, of the speakers or the people attending, if that list is available, again, have a look at their LinkedIn profiles, their Twitter accounts. We have so much information on the internet, so almost too much information. So yeah, you have a wealth of, opportunity, a wealth of knowledge before you go into that event. And it's also nice because you create a sort of familiarity for yourself. So you're not going in completely blinded of what people do and what their background is, so that also help you with you increasing your confidence and your ability to approach people, so that sense of familiarity.
I mean, I definitely used lists there's a top 35 under 35 in the wealth sector that's published on an annual basis. That was quite a useful thing to find out sort of who's who as I was coming through in the industry. And I always found that I could reach out to people on those lists and their reaction wasn't like, why are you contacting me? It's sort of like, well, yeah, a lot of people are contacting me right now, which is great because it was at a stage in their careers where they were open to actually being in touch. So I think it's about, like you say, there's loads of resources out there. It's about tapping into things that are relevant for you and they're not being held back by just reaching. I mean, LinkedIn obviously gives you the tool to reach out to people in quite a managed way where if they want to connect and, be in touch with you, they will be. If not, you don't really worry about it. So I definitely think people should put a bit of work into looking at what is available out there. And also LinkedIn itself. I mean, by the time you've got enough contacts on LinkedIn, you can Google and search and refine your searches so you can find new people that you could connect with or find out who's connected to who. So I think it's that doing that bit of homework, doesn't it? Pays dividends.
Yeah, definitely. Like when I started Silverpen, as I mentioned, that my initial pool of people were the friends and contacts that I already knew. But then in terms of the next circle, you could be approaching people on LinkedIn that you might be introduced to or you might not be introduced to. It's just about tailoring your pitch essentially to that person or to that organization, and just being, you know, strategic and careful and seeing what you can offer, again, what kind of services are aligned.
Thank you. And there's plenty of time for questions. Still do pop a question in the chat or the Q&A on the YouTube, and we will bring it up and answer it. But just building on that, Nicola, really, as we're saying about on the elevator pitch, on research, then you're coming to the event, and it's about, I suppose, building that connection, rapport, soft skills. You know, that's really the next challenge. Once you've done you've got your elevator pitch, you've done your bit of homework, you're coming up to actually be at the event. What are some other soft skills that you think should be front of mind, or that are important in this field to succeed?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of mentioned them earlier, but listening skills are key, I think, to building a connection and building a rapport. Just again, try and understand what someone's needs are, listen to them, ask open-ended questions, you know, ask genuine questions, be interested, don't talk too much. Like, nobody wants to listen to your voice for too long. And if you're talking too much, you're not listening and taking in the information that you don't know.
Do you think as well it's important to go in with an open mind, such that if you go into something thinking, I only want to meet X or Y, you know, if you're not an accountant, I'm not interested, so, as an example, that can be quite a limiting way of networking, can't it? Where you're so focused on meeting a certain type of person that you miss the point that actually networking is a process. It takes time. You chat to people and you work your way out around, isn't it? To be too focused can be an issue, can't it?
Yeah, so don't focus on one particular person or a certain person that you want to meet, but be open, obviously. Again, don't try to talk to everyone superficially, but you know, if there's a kind of spark or an interest, you know, a commonality, then do try and build that connection with them. But yeah, be open-minded, because you just don't know what connection or what person, even if you don't see it immediately, it may be something that grows over time. So I can give an example where this is quite random, but I would go to the cafeteria of a college that I would offer teaching to, and I would go to the cafeteria every day, get a coffee, you know, have a chat with the guy who ran the cafe. And then over a few months, like, we would talk a little bit more. And then I mentioned that I run my own business, and he turned out to be the owner of the cafes in this institutional education that had a number of different schools and colleges, and it's got a boarding school now. And he said to me, I can put you in touch with the kind of key players or the key directors in the building, which, you know, again, is something quite far removed, quite a tenuous connection, but you just don't know what or how a connection will be able to develop in the future. So don't be closed-minded is the key takeaway.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's a massive lesson. And I mean, in terms of finding things in common, I mean, things that I always go to as easy ones is, you know, the location around which people work. Where do you work? You know, City, West End. Where do you live? Where do you commute from? I mean, obviously, where do you go on holiday is quite banal. But, you know, there are lots of little tips that people can have in their back pocket, safe things to in order to find your common points, you kind of need to think your way around the conversation, don't you, a little bit, and get into practice of this kind of rapport building, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is a skill. It's like I said, it's about getting into practice. So, you know, no one is born naturally an incredible worker. And there might be some people who have a great talent at it, but it is a skill just like everything else, which you can build on and improve on. And yeah, you can just develop it through practice, essentially.
I mean, one thing I find really, really good is if you know a few people at an event, working out whether you can introduce them to someone else. So like if you're chatting with someone, you kind of have come to a point, a conclusion, as it were, or the idea that you can introduce them to someone else is quite a a useful thing, I think, because it illustrates, particularly if you're in a networking environment, people are very happy to meet more people, and it's a way of developing the conversation and showing your thinking of others, isn't it? I mean, there's a variety of tactics and techniques. People dread like being stuck with someone in a sense, don't they? And how to close a conversation might be, oh, I'm going to get a drink, go to the bar, you know, do you know X? You know, there's a variety of ways of gracefully exiting a conversation as well, aren't there, as part of networking, that are important things to try and think about.
Yeah, exiting a conversation can be quite difficult or quite challenging. So, but the worst thing you can do is just walk away and just but yeah, just, you know, be polite, be professional, be respectful. Just say, you know, you're going to go meet someone else.
Or sometimes to say, do you have a card? Should we swap a card, as a way of closing it? Like, just sort of, you've had a chat. Oh, do you have a card? Okay, I'll drop you a line. I think these are all good tactics. But in terms of tips on physical behavior, what kind of demeanor should people be thinking about when approaching these events?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, as I said earlier as well, non-verbal communication is so important. So these are quite obvious tips, but sometimes people just forget about them. So, you know, smile when you turn up. Nobody wants, so I gave the example earlier of having gone to 2 networking events in a day and the office as well, but no one wants to meet grumpy, stressed Nicola, like, and nobody.
Yeah.
So just turn up, you know, smile, be positive, you know, good posture, clean, dry handshake, and just kind of maintain eye contact. Don't overdo it with the canapes as well. Again, it can be, you might be hungry, but just try and, you know, discipline yourself. Don't overdo it with the alcohol as well if you do drink. So
think about what's convenient to eat. Like, if you've got the messiest canapé in the world, just go, you know, skip over it perhaps.
Yeah. Because you're also, you need to keep a clean face, clean clothes. Simple things like that.
How can you leave, you know, like, what should you be thinking about in terms of takeaway? Is it on the messaging you should be thinking, like, you know, what do I want to leave this person with? Obviously, we can chat about this in a sec, but the follow-up is another phase. But, you know, is it about just having a condensed message around how you can help, you know, and what you could do together, you know, what you can leave on a positive note, like, oh yeah, it'd be great to catch up, come over to my office for a coffee, and, you know, like, it's good to have a definite close, isn't it? Sometime a call to action almost.
So again, kind of just try to, you know, you could say, I'll send you the article that on that topic that we were talking about.
Commit to it and do it, isn't it? Because I find that actually committing something and doing it puts you in the top 1% of anything, because so many people don't follow up. They do talk about something, but if actually the next morning they get back, oh, great to see you last night, and here's that thing from the FT. Perfect, isn't it? And it's rare, you know, it's surprisingly rare.
And I think the reason it is rare is because people don't write things down. So when you go into an event, you're obviously in a very stimulated environment. You're meeting a lot of people. You're going to forget things. So you're going to forget names. You're going to forget faces. So try, one thing that I do, or I learned from someone else, was to take photos of people's name badges and add them on LinkedIn, you know, the next get in contact with them. And then
the old school business card, you know, you need some reminder, don't you? You say, if it's photos, that's fine. If it's, you know, but I mean, an old-fashioned business card can be good, because even that can take you back to the conversations. Without those prompts, everything becomes forgotten, and you move on, don't you?
And then write things down for yourself as well. So if you did say you were going to send that person a link to an FT article, then just note it down and make some, because you're going to meet a few people and you're going to be distracted. You're going to forget, you know, you've got busy jobs. So make notes. I can't stress making notes enough.
Good advice. There's a question here from Raphael, and I think this is an interesting one for you, Nicola. How would you go about with networking if your goal is to relocate to another country or place like the Middle East? What would you say? Obviously, not knowing much about Raphael's situation, what would you advise them to start thinking about?
So I mean, if your office has offices in the Middle East already, then you're thinking about internally networking and getting put in touch with the right people who might be making that decision, build connections with people in that office in the first instance. But you can do that by getting introduced to other people. I think that would be the best way to go in the first instance. I don't know if you agree, David.
Yeah, so I suppose it's the internal channels, if that is an opportunity, is sort of, I suppose, find out. When I was working in banking, we had offices in Dubai, Singapore, Bahamas, and I always made it my business to try and create and connect and create value for the local managing director, so that if you could create an opportunity to go there to visit, if you were interested, that door was open. And I suppose it's just mapping those offices, if that is part of it, and knowing who's who. And then, like you say, the internal channels on HR, looking at if there is jobs boards, if there are things, but also just speaking up, isn't it? So if in your appraisal, there's always channels through which you can say what your goals are, aren't they? And sometimes people can be reluctant to actually speak up because they feel like, it's a bit rushed. But if there are goals like this, you need to be tabling them, don't you? Otherwise they won't happen. Exactly. You need to really, really set your agenda out with your seniors so they're totally clear where you want to go, isn't it? Because if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, definitely. And that is key to networking. You've got to be careful about it initially. Like, don't ask too soon. Don't.
Yeah.
But you do need to be vocal about what it is you want to achieve, and don't be scared to ask. Just be very careful about the way you phrase it, and be diplomatic.
And I think if you were thinking about it the other way around, where you wanted to go there, but you've got skills, and you think you could find a job over there, I suppose it's about things like using LinkedIn to network with perhaps recruiters over there, firms that you'd like to work with, HR connections in those firms. Do your research. If it's external, in a sense, there's fewer barriers because you're going to be changing your job. So it's about a job search. And I think LinkedIn, make sure your LinkedIn profile is obviously spick and span, reflective of what you can do, what you can bring. And as you mentioned on the top, Nicola, being able to work internationally or to connect with people in other countries, that takes a very, refined communication skill set, doesn't it? You have to be able to go to other cultures and be able to fit in, and you've got to be high sort of EQ.
Yeah.
So things like that are going to be important, aren't they, in making that move? Because culturally, you've got to show a company you can fit in. You not only worked in London and you've always grown up in the UK, but you've got transferable skills, isn't it? Without transferable skills, it's hard to demonstrate, isn't it?
Yeah. And culture, you're right, culture is key, because you can read a lot about a certain culture, you can read books, but the way you present yourself and the way you act within a certain culture, it's something that you have to learn. So, if you are pursuing a role in the Middle East, go on holiday or go and be in an environment so that you can pick up on things, because as much as you read about Ramadan, for instance, unless for me personally, until I had lived it, I didn't, necessarily understand or appreciate the real kind of the real elements of it, and what what that meant for people.
But their culture, I imagine there were cultural shocks and surprises, weren't there? I mean, that's part of the journey of living somewhere else, aren't there? But did you have moments where you thought, wow, this is different to what I thought, this is not what I expected?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. And what's your advice? So part of the reason I created PCD is that when I was looking for networking as a younger person, it wasn't available. And so I essentially created a group that I thought I want, that gave me what I wanted. And I've seen others over the years, obviously, do all sorts of things, create groups. I mean, do you think that if people are finding the event circuit that is there is not what they want, they should go out and try and make something happen? I mean, what do you advise people who don't find the kind of, they know the professionals are out there. It might be, for example, getting together women in a certain sector, or not by sex but by industry or region, or they might just be absent, mightn't it? And there's an opportunity for someone to come along and look at it differently, or if it's it doesn't, and also it gives an alternative to, it doesn't always have to be a drinks thing, it might be meet over a lunchtime or for tea, or it gives alternatives. It doesn't always have to be alcohol based in the same, do you encourage people to look at creating something new if they can't find what they need?
Oh, definitely. I mean, having started my own business, although it's still very young, thankfully it's doing well, but it is about identifying a gap in the market and seeing what the demand is. And if you're in a position where you think, oh, I could do with this particular organization, or that would be really helpful to XYZ people, and have initial conversation to see if it's something that would appeal to other people as well before you put all your energy and time in investing in creating something. But if you see that there is a gap, there is a demand, then yeah, absolutely go for it.
Things can start small, can't they? A coffee shop meetup, or meeting for lunch can be the acorn, isn't it, of these kind of networks. They don't start big, they start and grow, isn't it? So I mean, I'm always a big advocate of people, just if networking is not delivering for you, try and club together with some like-minded people and make it happen, because it's not about cost, it's really about effort. It's like, will you put yourself out there? It's that bit of jeopardy, isn't it? Can I tell people that I'm going to do this? And it's about steeling yourself, isn't it, and making it happen.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough the fact that just do what it is that you say you want to do. Yeah. Just do it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Like you said, if you meet up in a coffee shop, there's no costs involved apart from a coffee, which is nothing. So just do it, basically. And then if it fails, it fails. But if it does well, then it does well, and that could lead to something else. So yeah, definitely.
We're just coming into the last 10 minutes now. So if you have got a question, don't leave it hanging to the last second. Do get it in the chat now, and we can discuss it and hopefully help you. But just coming to the final element, and a really crucial element of networking is on the follow-up side. I mean, what is it that you advise people think about when they've come back from that event? As say you've snapped your images, you've got a pocket full of business cards. What are some of the steps you should be thinking about that next day?
Yeah, following up is probably the most important part of networking, because you can meet people in the street, you can meet people at Sainsbury's, meet people at an event, but it doesn't matter unless you stay in contact with them. So for instance, through Silverpen, I've stayed in contact with quite a lot of people, and that just that could just be a message to see how they are, or how if there's something that I think they would find interesting, if there's a job opportunity I think they would like, or if they are looking to be connected with someone, or a specific role. So it's about keeping in contact, and the immediate, I guess, rewinding that, or going back a few steps. Once you've met someone, like you said, add them on LinkedIn. Don't wait too long. Next day or a couple of days after, get in contact with them either on LinkedIn or by email, and just kind of just send a link to something that you think they might find interesting, or something that you spoke about during the event. Offer to introduce them to someone else, invite them to another event that's coming. So find something so it's not just a generic, oh, good to meet you, and then that ends the relationship.
It has to say something, doesn't it?
Exactly. And try and be positive as well through your email, through your message, because that is quite evident as well.
I also think that using some appropriate use of things like WhatsApp as well, where I find keeping in touch with people and you've had a reason to swap a message with them. Not I've met them at the night before and then the next morning you're WhatsApping them. It's not that, but in terms of keeping in touch, there's numerous channels, aren't there? If you think about it, like email is one channel, LinkedIn and people seeing you on LinkedIn is another. WhatsApp is something. It's about, I suppose, just looking at what's appropriate, isn't it, at that time to keep visible, because in terms of referrals and connectivity as well, visibility is a valuable commodity, isn't it? Because I remember when I was working in professional services, having a name on the tip of your tongue, if you need something for some area of law or tax, it's about being memorable, isn't it? Is one of the key hurdles, is like that recall, isn't it? Oh, I'll give them a call because I think they'll be able to help. So it's like balancing across these channels, isn't it? But make sure you're utilizing them all to the full, but not, in an appropriate way, isn't it? Is the challenge.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the only kind of bit of advice I would say is just use common sense, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a thing you say, but it doesn't really say much. But it's just, you know, see what you think is appropriate. Don't go beyond that. Don't overstep boundaries as well. And kind of read the room, see what someone is open to, and how open they are, and then just take it from there, essentially.
Great. Well, as we just wrap up this conversation, where can people find out more about Silverpen? I mean, what do you publish updates and newsletters? You've got courses going on. How can people find out more if they want to engage with you?
So we've got a website, which is www.silverpencareers.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, Nicola Solomou. And then we have obviously our email and contact number, which they can get in touch through there. And we are running a negotiation skills workshop in September, end of September, October, which I'll post about on my LinkedIn. That's essentially, those are the kind of main platforms at the moment.
Fantastic. Well, we've also just created a half an hour training course, which is available now on hnwadvisor.com. All those watching today will get a link to that copy. But Nicola, I've really enjoyed